Welcome to the Catholic Conversation. I am Steve Green, Director of Keno Catechetical Institute at the Diocese of Phoenix, and I am the Cradle Catholic.
And I'm Becky Green. I'm the Director of the Green Homeschooling Institute and everything else in our lives, and I am the convert to the faith. I was just noticing that something looks different on my husband. You shaved part of your beard.
I did. So dear listener, I went from the full beard to the goatee. So how many minutes do you think we should dedicate to talking about my facial hair?
Not a lot, because it's not necessary, but I'm just trying to figure out, when did you do that?
2 days ago. Which has been pretty great, because when I did it, it's a fairly significant thing to go from a full beard down to a goatee.
We need to spend some more quality time
And so
together.
I just thought, I'm not going to say anything. I'm just going to wait and see, A, who will be the first one to realize it, and B, how long it will take. So the good news is you're the first one to catch it.
None of the children have said anything.
None of the children have said anything. No, you're the first one to catch it, but it did take you 2 days.
We need more FaceTime. It took me 2 days to realize it. What I noticed was it suddenly looked like you were slimmer in your facial region.
Oh, that's good.
And then I looked at you, and then something's different. But that's what it is. You shaved part of your beard. That's hilarious.
You've lost weight. Oh, no, I just lost beard.
You lost beard. I like the goatee. I like the look. I would actually, when I first met Steve, he had a little bit of one, and I actually had created in my mind this idea that I would never date someone with facial hair, because I really liked
I was different from the ideal she had created in her mind in lots of ways.
Never date a seminarian. I will never date a Catholic. All sorts of things that I just threw out the window when I met you. But you had a goatee. Now you have a goatee. Now you've had a beard for a long time. I've become accustomed to it.
Yeah, I think like 3 years.
Yep.
No, long.
Oh, because from a goatee to a beard.
Yeah, I've had facial hair forever.
Facial hair forever.
As our dear listener may remember, at one point, like about a year ago, I just totally shaved.
Yep.
That didn't go over well.
I didn't think it was the best move.
No one did. The face under the beard, as it turns out, had changed since the last time it made its
Mine has changed, but it hasn't been
unbearded
hidden.
appearance.
So you've had, yeah. So
Yeah.
I was all for it.
We'll ride the goatee for a while and see how that goes.
Looking good. It's very Count of Monte Cristo.
Yes. Well, I did just escape from prison, and now I'm plotting my revenge.
Speaking of prison, I don't really know if this is a segue. The other day at dinner, Avery, who listens to a lot of her history on one of our Audible books, that she likes to listen to books, and I found that she just seems to
a lot of people are like that. A lot of people
I don't
actually
learn well that way at all. I typically fall asleep. I actually use listening to audiobooks as a way to help me fall asleep. Hello! One of our children is invading at the moment. There's always a very Lenny and Squiggy kind of entrance with our children who come in while we're recording. So anyways, I've totally lost my train of thought. So Avery has been listening to her history, and she just announced at the dinner table, today I learned about Adolf Hitler. I thought, well, let's see where this is going to go, right? And as you would imagine, dear listener, if someone says, I learned about Adolf Hitler, your obvious thought then is that this is going to end in a dance party.
Naturally.
Right? I mean...
How else
seems
could it
to be
end?
the logical direction that something like that would progress.
And so, spoiler alert, it did.
Oh, it did. Because as she began to share about what she'd learned about Adolf Hitler and all of his atrocities and what was going on in Nazi Germany, I was just kind of sitting there like, yay, we learned something today.
She did. She had
it down.
She had a whole bunch of information to pass along.
Which was good, because we had recently, I'd popped on a couple of those PragerU videos, the Man on the Street videos for Michael and Donovan, to kind of share with them sort of, there's a little bit of the culture that you're going to be going out into. And they had done a Man on the Street interview of people about what they knew about the Holocaust. And it was frightening what some people had.
The ignorance is
staggering. One person was like, a hologram, isn't that something like in space? It was frightening. So I was grateful to see, okay, my 10-year-old at least has a grasp, at least understands who this person was and sort of the atrocities that were committed and all of that kind of stuff. But then this led into, as it always does, the conversation around the table that just kind of took it on its own life. And so I talked about, what we need to be prepared for potentially as Catholics, right? And it got into, she was talking about St. Maximilian Kolbe and his self-sacrifice. And then that moved into, it reminded me of a movie that I remembered seeing many years ago called Swing Kids. And
Becky got verklempt.
I did. I got verklempt. As usual, I try to describe what happened in the movie, and then I can't. And then I had to pass it over to Steve, who hadn't seen the movie, and so he wasn't able to really share.
You showed me Swing Kids.
Did I show you Swing Kids?
Yeah.
I don't
Back
remember.
In the day. Yep.
Anywho,
Swing
Heil. So I was telling the kids about it, and then they're like, "What's swing dancing?" And so then I got really excited because my floor routine in college for gymnastics, my floor routine was to sing, 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 and so I got
my floor routine was to walk on them.
And you did quite well.
Both in college and since.
Yes.
My floor routine has not changed much.
No, it hasn't.
Occasionally to lay on them and read a book to the kids. Okay, anyway.
Your
floor routine in college.
My floor routine was sing, sing, sing. So I have
Hold on, but dear listener, as you'll remember, I'm just context in case we've got a new listener. We might have 2 of them by now.
Yeah, right.
So, dear additional listener, in case you aren't aware of this, Becky was a lifelong gymnast, a 92 Olympic hopeful, trained under the 1984 Olympics coach, and then went on to compete in gymnastics for the University of Arizona, which is how she ended up in Arizona, where we met. There we go. Okay, so in college, your floor routine was swing, 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 Benny Goodman.
I think it's sing, sing, sing.
Sing, 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 right. Swing, swing, sing, sing, sing with a swing.
Yeah, you're swinging.
Benny Goodman and his orchestra.
I had a little bit of the swing moves in it. It was super high-paced, fast-paced. It was a lot of fun. I loved performing it. I was exhausted at the end of it. And so I just, I said, well, you gotta hear some of this music. So Steve goes over and pulls up trusty Amazon Prime Music to pull up some of the sing, sing, sing versions that they have on there. And I'm trying to show Avery what swing dancing is. So I grabbed my husband because he and I had learned some swing dancing. Before we got married, we took a lesson or 2.
We did. We learned
and I had,
step, rock,
I had fantasies of like being on Dancing with the Stars.
She really did. She was very disappointed to find that I did not have the same dream of being a competitive swing dancer.
Or even B-level stars, but we weren't able to go on to that show.
Well, right, but Dancing with the Stars minus the stars is Dancing with the Stars. That wouldn't have wrecked anything.
I wanted to go on and dress modestly and do a little swing dance, Steve didn't have the same aspirations, so that kind of fell by the wayside. Then I had lots of babies.
Becky's dressed as a nun for this night's performance.
and then I had lots of babies, and then there's not a lot of swing dancing. But now we whipped out the swing dancing, and Avery is just all excited about this. So she wants to do some swing dancing with you.
Yeah.
And I tried to grab Michael, my oldest, because I thought, well, Avery's dancing with Steve.
Yep. Avery, like her mother, is just on this swing dance. This is fun. This is great. It's dancing.
Curled up into the air.
Yep. Love it. Love it. Love it.
Michael,
like his father,
did not want to swing dance.
He really didn't.
Nope. And I was trying to. And if you know anything about dancing, that the man has to lead. It doesn't work if the woman's leading. And I think it's a beautiful metaphor, as our friend Sharon Phelan uses to describe what marriage is meant to be. Right? You got to have this leadership there.
Like a ballroom dance.
And so even in swing, the guy's got to lead it. So for me to grab my son, and I'm trying to get him to lead me through.
Not very Ephesians 5 on your part. You're kind of It
didn't work. Did not work. And
look at it from Michael's perspective. Here he was, just enjoying a nice conversation about Adolf Hitler, and then all of a sudden a swing dance party breaks out. I mean, how would you feel if you were a 15-year-old boy?
And I did inform him. I said, listen, Michael, if you're called to marriage at some point, God willing, you'll get to dance with me at your wedding. And he was shocked, dismayed, really put off by the idea. The groom dances doesn't he dance with his bride? Why is he dancing with his mother? And I'm like, it's a tradition. But the father dances with the daughter and you dance with the mom, and how can you?
And then he asked, does the groom have to dance with his father? No, Michael, we're good. We're safe.
So our swing night ended at that point, and we went back to talking about Adolf Hitler. So. Yeah. That has nothing to do really with our book, other than it is the real religion in our home that we are subscribing to and trying to animate our lives and our vocation with. And that is the title of this fantastic book by Father Jeffrey Kirby.
Yes, Father Jeffrey Kirby, first time guest, but we're really excited. It's a great book. It's been a delight reading it, and one of those that just it's thought provoking, insightful. It gives you a lot to kind of take away and ponder. So yeah, Real Religion: How to Avoid False Faith and Worship God in Spirit and Truth, with Father Jeffrey Kirby, when we return on The Catholic Conversation. Notre Dame Federal Credit Union has spent 80 years striving to live its values and do real tangible good in the world. Becoming a member owner with Notre Dame FCU is choosing a partner that supports your community and shares your Catholic values. With nationwide shared branching and 24/7 access to your money through their mobile app, you know you will get the care and support you deserve anytime, anywhere. Where you bank does matter. Join today at NotreDameFCU.com/Arizona, insured by NCUA. And welcome back to the Catholic Conversation. I am Steve Green, the Cradle Catholic, with my lovely wife, Becky, the convert. We're thrilled to be joined by a first-time guest, Father Jeffrey Kirby. Father Kirby is the pastor of Our Lady of Grace Parish in Indian Land, South Carolina. He's also an adjunct professor of theology at Belmont Abbey College. And he's the author of the new book, Real Religion: How to Avoid False Faith and Worship God in Spirit and Truth. Father Kirby, welcome to the Catholic Conversation.
Thank you. It's good to be with you both.
We're glad to have you. Since this is your first time on the podcast, maybe you could do our listener the favor of just kind of giving a brief autobiography introduction of yourself, and then maybe take us into the genesis of this particular project, Real Religion. What made you decide to write it? What made you decide to write it now?
Yeah, so thank you. I've been a priest for almost 14 years, originally an Army brat, so grew up with my father in the military. So a lot of my early life was actually spent in what was then West Germany during the Cold War. We came back to the United States when I was about 13. So South Carolina's home, even though people always ask, where's your accent? And so before 13, my only home was the U.S. Army. But
you had a thick German accent, like South Carolina.
right, exactly. It will really confuse people. So went to Franciscan University in Steubenville. Was a great help to my faith. And then taught high school for a little bit before going into seminary. And then attended seminary at the North Marian College in Rome. And then have been in my priesthood so far, right now pastor. Before that I was vocations director. And then before that, I was in different assignments as a parochial vicar and various other chaplaincies in high schools and so on. So it's been quite a ride. And
they put some miles on the tires for you.
Exactly. And I feel it. You know what I mean? It's like I wake up and then 10 minutes later, my body wakes up, you know.
I understand that. Yeah.
But in terms of this particular book, this book really comes from, as I say, from my heart as a believer, fellow believer, and from my heart as a priest, as a shepherd, because I have begun to slowly observe, this has been, through the years, just more and more deepening in awareness, that the real heart of worship, it seems we've lost that, or it's been eclipsed, and the average person comes to worship with different expectations than what God has promised, are worshiping a God who is not the God of revelation. And oftentimes because of that, they feel betrayed or hoodwinked or somehow been toyed with, or that God has failed, or the church has failed, or true worship has failed. And this plays out in so many different ways. And trying to answer specific things. A lot of the stories in the book are pastoral. From my ministry, I try not to tell stories where I'm currently assigned, so there are other parishes I've been at out of respect and privacy.
Like me, he's talking about.
Exactly. I'm page 45. No.
Hey, Ethel, Father wrote a chapter about you.
Exactly. I always tell the people here, none of my stories are about you. Of course, they always kind of wink. Yeah, right.
I've changed the name. It's totally fine.
Right. It only sounds like you. No.
That's great.
From those experiences, just bring it all together and saying, rather than piecemeal attempts to address things, so let me bring this all together and really, in my own mind, just trying to formulate, like, what is the problem? What am I trying to say? Because we're in the midst of other things, pastoral duties, and and other responsibilities. It's a short answer, or abbreviated answer. It's an answer that maybe was succinct, but it just didn't have the full context. So I said, I need to sit down and try to get this straight in my own mind, because when we try to give just brief answers, oftentimes people can misunderstand, or we don't express it well. And so really it was first a spiritual work for myself. What do I mean? What am I trying to say? Why does this bother me? Or just introduce a certain discomfort in my own soul when people talk a certain way about worship or about God, about their expectations of worship. And then from that, it was in presenting the book to people of belief, or people of goodwill, or people who are searching, and say, this really is an attempt to explain biblical worship. So I think in one unexpected way, it's already helped. Someone reached out to me and said that they had always been critical of Christian worship because of the way that they saw it. Mm-hmm. But in reading the book, and I'm suspecting it was on, some type of electronic version, because the paper version right now has just come out. So, but the person reached out and says that they read it and they said, now I understand what Christian worship is. If that's what worship is, then what they've been critical of has been the bad versions, the incomplete versions, or false versions of worship, right? So it's kind of like the person who doesn't know Christianity, and then they see the life of a Christian and say, well, I don't want that, right? Right. It's like, wait a minute, let me tell you about our Lord and what we're called to be, what we try to be. So in many respects, that's one of the hopes of the book, is to, in our own hearts as believers, to fan that flame back, to some real fire. But then also to just explain to people of goodwill that this really is what Christian worship is. We never fulfill it completely. We're fallen, but some aren't even trying, right? And so in order to give a clear vision, that's kind of the hope of the book, and why I wanted to write it now. And obviously the pandemic and when worship in many places was suspended, it raised awareness and interest in the topic. So I hope that this book serves a good for all people, believers, inquirers, those who are kind of unsure and searching.
What you were just saying reminds me of the Bishop Fulton Sheen quote, and I won't get it exactly, but something along the lines of, there aren't 100 people in the world who hate the Catholic Church, but there are millions who hate it for what they think it is.
Yes.
And that, of course, is, I know, as I'm a convert, and that was very much my background in coming into learning more about the church and the faith, and what the true meaning is and what the true teachings are. And you're right, there are so many people out there that have created in their head, or just based on not having an education or being miseducated about the scriptural foundation, the truth. What do we really mean when we're talking about this God of revelation? And so many people don't have the fullness of that. And so they go along in their day-to-day with making decisions about their beliefs, making decisions about what they think the church is, what Christianity is. And it's all founded on not having the full truth, or having even been miseducated on that. Yeah. And regarding the way you break down the chapters is very readable, and you have the second chapter, I believe, or the second section, is about this sentimentality.
Yes.
Oh, I think that's huge right now, because you can even hear it in the way people talk. I feel like everything is, I even catch myself sometimes, I'm like, I'm going to use it. I think.
Yes. Yes.
Yes. Not I feel, but everything is based on this, there's this feelings-based emotion that is undergirds every decision and everything that we're seeing in the world. And that has very much so been assigned to our faith and to religion and to the practice. And so it becomes, you use the example in there, I'd like you to talk about it, about the lady who went to confession and is just not feeling it, doesn't have the feels about coming out of it. And that takes on so much meaning in terms of how that person's relationship with God is based. So I hand that back to you, because I think that's such an important piece of what we are experiencing now in this world.
Yes, and that story has stuck with me, because it stung in the course of that interaction where, I everywhere I'm at, any assignment, I strongly encourage the sacrament of reconciliation, strongly encourage confession. It's a powerful source of grace. So this particular woman heard the call eventually and said, yeah, I need to start going to confession. Well, I guess she had heard so many stories from other friends about how, I just feel like a weight's lifted, from my chest, and I feel so great, I feel so refreshed. And so, yes. So, she was expecting, all these emotions, and she went and she walked out and like, well, I didn't feel anything, right? And her conclusion was, well, because I didn't feel anything, because, when sentimentality becomes the standard of all things,
right.
The basis of reality. If I don't feel it, it's not real. If I don't feel it, it's not good. Well, she applied that falsely and said, well, if I don't feel it, what's the point?
Mm-hmm.
I just thought, what? Like, this is, that reality is completely discarded because I don't feel it. Now, inversely, I think that's a real challenge to the rest of us, is that when we do have that emotional response in confession, which is a gift and it's great, and we're not opposed to emotions, but when we share those experiences of confession to maybe say, I felt great, but the most important thing was that I know my sins are forgiven. So there can be a catechesis too to the rest of us, that even when we're given these emotional experiences, they're a gift. We can't expect them. The more powerful gift is that our sins are forgiven, right? So whether I feel it or not, I know that those sins are gone. And I was just very caught off guard by that. And I shared that story because it stung at the time. And legitimately at the time, I don't think I gave a very good answer. I tried to provide some explanation and so on. And in many respects, this entire book is an answer to that experience and many others where, what? You just want to say, like, what? And yet that's the world we live in, because when religion becomes a sentiment, and that is the predominant. So of the 7 deadly sins, is if pride is the main one, which it is, and all the others are really just manifestations of pride, so anger, envy, and so on. In the same way, in terms of false religion, sentimentality is first, and all the others are just variations and expressions of that, because it all comes down to me rather than God. So
that's right. Yeah.
Is that because we have essentially become a culture that has created God in our image and likeness rather than recognizing we're created in His?
Yes, amen. Once we talk in the book, I speak about the virtue of religion, and even that language catches people off guard. So like virtue of religion, the immediate response I sometimes get is virtue of religion. Well, that makes it sound like it's something I'm supposed to do, and it's like, yes, like this is a duty of a human person. Like we have the other virtues of kindness and mercy and justice and so on. So this is a virtue. Like if you want to live a fully human life, if you want to, do what the human person is called to do to fulfill that vocation as a child of God, then yes, you must fulfill the duties of the virtue of religion. But a lot of times we've treated religion as if it's just kind of a hobby. Like, hey, if that gives you meaning or purpose, it's like, if that's your thing, great. It becomes this kind of capricious option, as opposed to a real responsibility. And that flows, as we were speaking, when God is no longer the center of hearts or homes or society. Now, the great thing about this is when we get the virtue of religion right, everything else flows and comes together, right? So if I worship God, I exercise the virtue of religion, and virtue of religion falls under the virtue of justice. So if I give God His due through religion, then it forces me and converts me to then give others their justice. So in one of the chapters I speak about social activism and so on. Well, if we neglect the virtue of religion and we just try to superimpose or exaggerate justice to our neighbor, well, then we end up trying to seek a good without God, or seek grace, the results of grace without God. So I think this exaggeration of emotion is when God is dethroned, rational thought is dethroned, facts are dethroned. It simply becomes, I think or I feel, therefore it will be. And if you tell me the way I feel is wrong, or the way I feel is the way that something should happen is wrong, then who are you, right? You become now the great sinner, right?
That's right.
As opposed to the one who's trying to be charitable to say, I understand you feel this way. Feelings are real. That's how you feel. But your feelings are wrong, right?
Yeah.
Or incomplete, or they need a broader context, right? So, our emotions have no moral identity. The way we feel are not good, are neither good nor evil, right? It depends on how we use them, right? So if I'm walking up to church and someone yells at me in the parking lot, right, for something, right, and I walk in and I just had this whole provocation of this anger and so on. I walk in and I start raising my voice at the ushers in the narthex, why is this here? Why is that there? No. Well, then I turned that feeling of anger, my own anger, this person's anger has been brought to me. I have this type of anger. If I reciprocate that in unkindness, then my anger becomes a sin, right? Mm-hmm. But if I walk in, I take all that energy from that anger, right? And I use it for greater service. Hey, good morning, everyone. How y'all doing? So good. Just go that extra mile, killing with kindness, right? Then I've turned that emotion of anger into a great good. Yeah. And that's how our emotions have identity. But if we try to say, because I feel this, it is right, that's just a recipe for disaster and for misery.
That's right. And we're talking to Father Jeffrey Kirby. He's the pastor of Our Lady of Grace Parish in Indian Land, South Carolina. He's also an adjunct professor of theology at Belmont Abbey College and the author of a great new book out from Catholic Answers Press, Real Religion, How to Avoid False Faith and Worship God in Spirit and Truth. Father, as you were saying that, I was just thinking, and this is a conversation we've had a number of times over the years on the show, on the podcast, but there's an interesting, I don't even know what to call it, phenomenon, maybe an interesting phenomenon. I'll go with that word in young people, say millennials, and then the Gen Z or iGen, or I don't know what they're being called now. Anyway, people younger than an old gray fellow like me, where so much of their existence is predicated on exactly what you were just saying: feeling, emotion. Everything has to be customizable to me. Everything has to be about how I feel, my self-identity, my own hierarchy of values. I'm a law unto myself, and everything and everyone needs to cater to that. And yet, strangely, that generation is often drawn to good liturgy, strong traditional liturgy, to the stability, to the tradition, to the beauty, as though even in the midst of this constant, fluid, changing, customizable existence that they live in, or they're kind of like they're steering their own ship through just chaos, they hit real religion. And not for all of them, of course. Some of them run the other way, screaming like their hair's on fire. But interestingly, in that strange demographic that I think everyone, the church included, is trying to kind of get their arms and head around, like, how this is the future. How do we evangelize these people? How do we feed these people? How do we form these people? Liturgy done well, worship done well, is actually one of the elements that really seems to resonate. Has that been your experience as pastor? Yes. And what do you kind of see in that interesting dynamic?
Yes, I think certainly the young people who give religion a second look are oftentimes very inclined to tradition, because they feel so isolated because of the world you've just described, where, again, I become a law unto myself, an emotion unto myself. And that just, again, leads to isolation, to misery, that they're looking for some type of connection. So certainly I see this great love for tradition. I mean, some time ago, a young person came up to me and asked me, Father, can you put me in the brown scapular? I'm like, kind of caught me off guard. I was like, what? It's like, can you put me in the brown scapular? I'm like, so I had to think about that for a minute. And I realized what they meant was invest them in the brown scapular. And I said, yes, my goodness, of course, I'd be happy to. And so we say the prayers, and I invest the person in the brown scapular. And I asked the young person, I said, how did you find out about this? It's a beautiful tradition in our church. Like, how did you find out about this? Oh, I read about it online. I just thought that would be something really cool, right? So again, this attraction where sometimes they don't even know the history or the full spirituality. Also, a lot of times they don't have the language, because when you live in a world of your own emotions, you don't have the language anymore to express, why does this appeal to me? Why do I find this irresistible? Why am I attracted to this? I would say concurrently, we find a lot of young people who have an immense heart for the vulnerable, the weak, the outcast, a great real push to the social issues, so whether it's the environment or gender equality or the protection of the unborn, and other vulnerable people. And even there, I think that, there's something that, in spite of themselves and everything they've been taught and the culture that has kind of created them this way, molded and shaped this view that has become the cultural norm, in spite of all that, there's something that is pushing them out of that in order to serve and to seek some type of good in society or in their neighbor. Our task, both with those who are attracted to the tradition, to the liturgy, the social issues, or all the above, is to then mold and shape them, give them that language, and show them how, add worship on that, and it just gets better and better, right? Or deeper spirituality, it gets better and better. And in many respects, perhaps that's the small contribution I'm hoping this book helps with, is, either the young people themselves, or more likely we adults who are trying to figure this out ourselves, and how do I engage this person who comes to the traditions of the church but still thinks gay marriage is okay and abortion's okay, and and the church is terrible, and doesn't quite see how this all fits together, right? Right. The person who thinks that the church has no spiritual power, but then wants and kind of keeps asking for holy water, right? Like, it's like, you do know what makes that holy, right? I mean, like, it's like the Holy Spirit through the church, right? So like sometimes those disconnects, we have to ourselves try to find that language of that way, and maybe this book can be one help among, I hope, many resources that are forthcoming, because try as we might, we are hardwired for worship, and God will call us out of these self-enclosures that we create or our cultures create. And to see young people who are looking and searching, like, we bear great moral responsibility to provide some type of guidance.
Yeah, amen.
We're a couple of minutes from our break, so I thought what we could do is have you just give a quick Cliff's Notes kind of touch on how you came to divide the book up into these five primary aspects that I know you said at the beginning. You were trying to wrap your mind about what is going on here from the pastoral perspective. So you have the tenets of biblical religion, when religion becomes sentiment, which we touched on a little bit, when religion becomes self-help, when religion becomes a commodity, and when religion becomes social activism. Maybe if you can just quickly go over why those umbrella terms, and then on the other side of the break, we can maybe unpack those a little bit more.
Yeah. So the first, in terms of the tenets of religion, so those are tenets, just guiding principles, and I drew from the scriptures and from our intellectual theological tradition, and tried to take very heavy theological points from St. Thomas Aquinas and Augustine, the other great teachers of our faith, and really break it down and use language that was more digestible. Because if we're going to talk about, what are the deviations of true religion, we should have it very clear in our minds what is true religion. So those tenets are very important, and those become the backbone of the rest of the book, because the other parts are used, these tenets are used to evaluate these other forms. So sentiment we spoke about, when emotion becomes king. We spoke about self-help. That's huge, where God himself is used as a means to achieve something else, this type of higher power, movement, and so on. And then when God, of course, is used as a commodity, that even, a God, again, is engaged in this way of, what's in it for me kind of attitude. And then, of course, political activism, social activism, which involves politics, where we try to create our own kingdom and make God into this type of earthly divinity, who, of course, is always on our side, whatever our beliefs are, right? And there were others that didn't quite make the cut, just because I wanted to focus on four in particular. If we go too broad, then we miss the point. And in my pastoral experience, those were the four predominant. Of course, we could keep going, though, in terms of others. Politics could have been its own, but I chose to merge that with social activism. So that's where these come from. And that first chapter, I think, is the heart of the book. And then the others are, again, deviations. And then we use the first chapter to compare contrast.
Yeah. Great. All right. Well, let's dive into that on the other side of the break. But in the meantime, dear listeners, stay right where you are, because we're going to be right back with Father Jeffrey Kirby, the author of Real Religion, How to Avoid False Faith and worship God in spirit and truth right here on the Catholic Conversation.
Greetings in the love of Christ. This is Bishop Thomas Olmsted of the Diocese of Phoenix. Last year, the Knights of Columbus in Arizona donated 11,000 hours in service and nearly $200,000 to those in need. They support our parishes, schools, seminarians, priests, deacons, and religious. From helping children in need to providing wheelchairs for the disabled, to helping stock food banks, the local active councils of thousands of Knights have been serving Arizonans in need for more than 100 years. That's why I'm asking you today to do something bold. We need you now, more than ever, to step into the breach. Join me, my fellow bishops and priests, by signing up at www.kofc.org/join us. Again, that's www.kofc.org/join us. And God bless you.
And welcome back to the Catholic Conversation. I'm Steve Green, the Cradle Catholic, here with my lovely wife, Becky, the convert. We're talking to Father Jeffrey Kirby. He's pastor of Our Lady of Grace Parish in Indian Land, South Carolina. He's also an adjunct theology professor at Belmont Abbey College, and he's the author of a great new book out from Catholic Answers Press, which Becky is holding up. I think you can see the title, which is Real Religion, How to Avoid False Faith and Worship God in Spirit and Truth. So, Father, when we went to the break, you just kind of walked us through the structure of the book, beginning with kind of those core tenets of biblical religion. Would that we had many hours before us in which to unspool the depth and richness of the whole book and all the chapters. But maybe let's begin with that. What as you were talking about that, said it's kind of the heart of the book, and we can compare the deviations to the real thing, which helps us not only appreciate the real thing, but recognize the deviations. And I was just thinking of that kind of brilliant fact that agents and officers of alcohol, tobacco, firearms, immigrations, and customs enforcement, the divisions that are trained to track counterfeiters are trained to do that by studying real currency. They don't go out and study all the many different kinds of counterfeit bills. They just learn every blessed detail of what real U.S. currency looks like, so that when they encounter a counterfeit, they immediately something's off there, and then they can, I just thought that was so interesting when I first heard that. It's like, yeah, that completely makes sense. You become intimately familiar with the real thing, so that not only can you appreciate the real thing, but then when something counterfeit comes your way, you're like, no, something's off there. So run with that in terms of liturgy, worship, the church, the whole thing.
Yes, I very much like that account, and in particular the part about the appreciation of what is authentic, because especially when we speak about worship, if the book was just describing deviations and all the things that are wrong, in our culture, or how people approach religion or worship, well, it would definitely be lacking, because the whole point in acknowledging the deviations is to further affirm what is the good, right? What is the true worship. And that emphasis is important because we have a God that so tremendously loves us that he revealed himself to us. And in that revelation, he shows us how to worship him. Now, when we worship God, we add nothing to his greatness. God is infinitely perfect and blessed in himself. That's the first line of the Catechism of the Catholic Church. God, infinitely perfect and blessed in himself. We add nothing to his greatness. And yet he shows us and instructs us by his revelation how we are called to worship him. Why? Well, because that only builds us up. It allows us to live out our vocation as his sons and daughters. So God, even in teaching us how to worship him, is doing so to help us, right? So that we can receive that peace, that joy that he desires to give to us. So when there's a deviation, it takes away. God cannot bless us the way that he desires to bless us. He cannot give us the grace that we both need and that he desires to give to us. And as we see people following these deviations, these false religions, false worships of God, we see the misery and the selfishness and the anxiety that oftentimes surrounds that world. And that's not how we're called to live. We are the children of God, right? We have been called in order to live in the light of our Father and to know his joy and to know that peace. So very much I love that account in terms of knowing the genuine article, right? The authentic thing. So especially in terms of worship, we can appreciate it and come to love it and understand why it's been given to us. So I think that's spot on. And the book had to start. I think any argument about any vice or deviation or sin has to begin with an affirmation of the good. Otherwise, what are we doing? This isn't a battle over wills. This isn't so that one team can win over the other. This ultimately is to try to understand how we're called to live as the children of God and receive all the graces that he desires to give all of us.
You were speaking with Father Jeffrey Kirby, author of Real Religion, How to Avoid False Faith and Worship God in Spirit and Truth. And I'm recalling in the book, in that section regarding the tenets, you relay the story of the woman who, after hearing a story about a particular account in the Bible, says, well, my God would never do that. Yes. And this I think this kind of trends back to what we've been talking about of this sentimentality aspect, as well as sort of turning God into kind of our crutch or our prop or whatever we use to affirm what our little universe, what the beliefs that we've constructed in our little individual personalized universe supports and what it looks like. And that struck me, because even the title of your book, I could, this could get canceled, Father, because it says real religion. And I think there's a knee-jerk reaction in society to often any kind of assertion that there is an absolute of anything or that there is a right of anything. I mean, we're even hearing bizarre things like the idea of having an accurate math answer could somehow be oppressive or suppressive. I mean, just wacky, wonky things that you've said, especially in society. And so the concept of even attaching real to anything when there is this perception that there is nothing that's real. You create your reality. And so you've titled your book to sort of, that's a contrast, that's a counter narrative to what we are experiencing today. And I think what a lot of people are caught up in, even though we are wired for worship, as I think you stated earlier in the first half, we're all wired to actually have this quote unquote real religion. So I throw it back to you to just within the title itself, you're making a bold statement.
Yes. And someone asked me about the title. They said, well, what do you mean by real religion? Like what is the, the quick definition? Say, well, real religion is when we worship God. False religion is when we worship ourselves. So we were to just give a quick, from the hip definition. That's the difference. But to your point, which is when we say real, suddenly that's provocative now, because who do you think you are? Because now you're imposing something on me. And so even though it's something that any person of goodwill can look at and say, well, religion is the worship of God. So real religion would be when you worship God, right? And if you don't worship God, like yourself, you're worshiping yourself, then it's not real religion. So, but yet even that capacity to reason or to play this out is, as you're pointing out, is now controversial. It's debated, and we can even be called terrible names if we were to imply that something is actually real, even though it's clearly real by the nature of the definition itself. And yet that's the world we live in. Here's the interesting thing about this, and here's what can give us hope as believers, is try as we might, as we were describing the young people in the last section, try as we might, our human nature is going to cry out and is going to work for real, for what is reality, for what is authentic. It's interesting that we live in a world where we can't say something is real, and yet the number one thing that most attracts young people today, authenticity. Right? Mm-hmm. So there's something inside our nature that tries to we can legislate it, we can impose public policy, we can shame people into silence, we can do all these things, but at the end of the day, we are the children of God, and we are designed, wired for a specific way of life and an acknowledgement of truth. We have reason. This is a gift given to us. It was not given to the animals, right? And we can use this. I always like the story also that G.K. Chesterton used. He says, the young man who knocks on the door of a brothel is searching for truth. He just has the wrong address, right? Mm-hmm. And the same is like, obviously there's a search for love, for intimacy in this particular account, and we will search for that because we are designed for that. That's how we find fulfillment, purpose, meaning, value as human beings. So, our culture can play these games, but in the end, the human person, the human status, our capacity, we're going to shine through all that, and that's my hope. And I think for the people who, were not raised in that culture, or who have, truly woken up from, that false reality, I hope that this book can help to give language, to give stories, to elaborate and to in their own explanation with their family members, to their friends, to their group of people that they can influence. Because the story you you shared about that, again, it's one of those accounts where you're just what, like, again, the book is written because there were so many moments like that where I didn't know what to say, like, and the full explanation is like, what is this, a joke? Because it was given a tour of St. Peter's Basilica. It's called the Altar of the Lie. It's the account of the husband and wife who were struck dead for lying before God and to the apostles. And I'm describing this account, and yet the woman said, well, my God wouldn't do that. Well, looking at our world today, I just assumed it was bad Christian formation. So, well, this is from the Acts of the Apostles, which is in the New Testament, which is the Bible, right? Thinking at that point, okay, Bible wins. No. Oh, no. Her emotion, her perception of God was higher than the scriptures, the very sources of revelation, right? And I just thought, okay, this it was a struggle enough just with the bad catechesis. We had to explain what Acts of the Apostles,
Right.
this book is. Now it's the next level where even when we give the source and the source of revelation, the way that we can know God, that now is subordinate in some people's minds to their own emotional preferences.
Yeah.
So the task is before us, but again, there's hope for us, because there's hope for our efforts. There's hope for real religion, because again, no matter how much we try, we can legislate till the cows come home. We can impose public policy. The shaming that happens, breaking through it all. We are human beings, and we just can't deny that, no matter how hard we try.
Yeah. That's so important. There's a couple of, I'm actually going to tie these two questions together, scribbling down. It's what you're saying is great. The book's great. So I had a bunch of thoughts as I was going through the second deviation, the religion as self-help. A term popped back in my head, and it's a term I'm the worst guy in the world at citing my sources, so I should have looked it up. But over the years, in both kind of theological discussions, philosophical discussions, cultural, anthropological kind of discussions, there's this term which is an attempt to describe what has become of religion in our culture. So like the book is, obviously has teed up dead red center. We've walked away from largely real religion, the worship of God instead of the worship of ourselves, and worship of God the way that God told us to worship him, not for his sake, but we've kind of walked away from all that, and yet we're religious. We can't avoid it. So we start making all these goofy, counterfeit, cut rate versions. And the term that I've heard thrown around a couple of times is moralistic, therapeutic deism. So just moralistic, meaning it's not moral as in a moral law, but it attempts to create kind of some sort of rules of engagement and thou shalt and thou shalt. So it's moralistic, it's therapeutic, and here's that self-help portion, right? Religion should help you. It should help you feel better. Gosh, my anxiety is so much better since I started meditating and doing yoga, or, et cetera. And then deism, which of course, now that's a thing that's been around for a long time. Deism is the idea that yes, God exists, or some higher power, and probably was involved with like creating this stuff, but that God just got up and walked away. He doesn't care what you're doing with your daily life or who you're sleeping with, or so this I just thought what a great term to kind of cover where religion has gone when it walked away from the real thing. This moralistic, therapeutic deism. So all that to ask this question. As a pastor and as a professor too, because of course you're teaching young people. How in the oxymoronic post-Christian West, right, that we all live in, as though the West could be post-Christian, but what is the value proposition that you make as a priest, as a pastor, as a professor, as an author, to a culture that when the minute you say religion, their first reaction is, well, what do I get out of it? Like, what's it? Why would I do that? I give up my Sunday mornings for what? Like, what's my return on investment sort of thing?
Yes.
So it just run with that, just from your experience, kind of how that all shakes out and how you would make that proposal that, real religion is actually, as opposed to the moralistic therapeutic deism.
Yes, yes. So if I want to just go back to that term, as you indicate, we see this used in various books and articles and so on. This moralistic therapeutic deism, and the moralistic, as you would describe it, it's not as if there's an acknowledgement of the objective moral order. It's just that the person sets certain standards expressed by the word values rather than virtue. Right? Virtue is objective. Value is I value it, or it has some value that I acknowledge. So, moralistic is I'm creating this. Okay, I won't lie because I choose not to lie. Not because lying's wrong objectively, but I choose not to do that. That's not who I am, right? And of course, therapeutic is that self-help, and then deism is, well, this God who did it started something and then left, and okay, but I'm the boss, right? Well, if you look at all three of those dimensions, at the end, what we see is a lot of me, right? So we talk about the unholy trinity of me, myself, and I. And in response to that, to your question, like what can help someone begin to question that false creed is the introduction of, aren't you tired of just living in your own world, right? Because that world that we just described, where I'm only worshiping myself, there's a lot of loneliness and sorrow and isolation and misery and confusion and anxiety, meaninglessness, lack of purpose. We keep going, right? Like we're describing the malfruits of the evil spirits here, right? And we go on and say, don't you want to come and be in a relationship where you can engage and be with another person and have an interaction and so on? And don't you ultimately want that relationship with God? So what I have found in terms of the people who are stuck in that cesspool of this, moralistic therapeutic deism, is the introduction of love. So tell me someone that you love. So my person says, I love my kids, or I love my spouse, or my boyfriend or girlfriend, or tell me someone you love, right? One occasion I think of very vividly, some years ago, I asked a young person, tell me someone you love, and they said, oh, my little niece, right? I would do anything for her, right? So okay, well, how does that love compare to this world that you've described, that you think is normative? Because this normative world will tell you that you've created, that if that niece ever opposes something you want or preference you want, that she needs to go, right? It's like, do you acknowledge that? And the shock and the horror, which is good. It's like, good, we are moral beings, right? What I mean? Objectively moral beings, right? There's kind of shock and horror, like, no, like I love my niece. And so good. So I think it's going to be love. I mean, and it shouldn't surprise us because we were made in the image of God who is love. That it will be love that kind of wakes us up, that makes us stop breathing the gas of this fallen culture and begin to say, maybe there is something beyond this, or there's more. And it will be by the love that we have for one another that ultimately we will again see the face of God and be led to a deeper relationship with him. So I think our solution, among many, there are other options that we can use and so on. And I love the creativity of many people in the church who are coming up with means to evangelize or to engage the culture. But pastorally, I have found love. Because again, it's the core of our humanness. Like it's what makes all of this worth living, and we love because we have been loved and are loved by God.
We're talking with Father Jeffrey Kirby, author of Real Religion, How to Avoid False Faith and Worship God in Spirit and Truth. And as you're speaking about this love, and from the very beginning, this theme of our humanity is wired for that love, not only to be loved, but to love in that same manner. But we have been dumpster diving since the beginning for the counterfeits and being seduced by the counterfeits, and not many people not ever able to hold up the authenticity and measure it properly unless they've really experienced it. And it reminds me of a quote from our own Bishop Olmsted that he said in the Into the Breach videos that were put out by Knights of Columbus. he said that God has a plan for your life, but so does Satan. And
wow.
with what we, and it's so profound, because when you just kind of grab onto that for a moment, you recognize that even as we have this true innate, imprint, that this desire in our hearts, and St. Augustine says, we won't have rest until we rest in thee. That there is this other force. Now, albeit he's not just the counterpart to God by any means. Right. Of course, he's subordinate to him, but the fact that he has been given the opportunity to kind of reign here and have this influence on us as a people, that being aware of his efforts to constantly seduce us off the track in something that looks a little like what we actually want and need. Take that for in the last few minutes we have and kind of unpack that a little bit.
First of all, I very, very much love your description of dumpster diving for the false views. That is perfect.
I may have heard that from Christopher West, so I'm not going to take full credit. It's like Steve and I, we like to hear great things and then we reuse it.
It's a great thing about being Catholic. You can borrow the brains of really smart people.
I think he's the one who said that, but sure, go ahead, give me some of the credit. I remembered it, Father.
Tradition, right? We just keep, that's great, because that's going to definitely find its way into a homily. Okay.
Good. Okay, good.
But to your point in terms of, and I love the way that your bishop expressed this, that the devil also has a plan for us, and the devil cannot create. He is a creature, and all he can do is manipulate. So he can twist and pervert, and just cause chaos in what God has created. And you can imagine that the devil knows he's lost. As one spiritual writer said, our life now is simply one slow motion to seeing the victory. And we see this type of movement, and the devil knows he's lost. So all he can do in order to hurt God, to try to claim some type of victory, right, is to damn his children, because we are made in his image. God's our Father, we look like him. And so he's on a kamikaze mission to destroy and damn as many children of God as possible, because he knows that that's how he can most offend or hurt God. And so, to the point that's being made, that there is another plan, and we have to be cautious. And we are fallen, and sometimes we're inclined to that. I love St. Paul, Romans 7. He says, I do not do the good that I know I'm supposed to, and I do the evil I do not want to. Like, who is going to save me from this body of death? But then he declares, thanks be to God in Jesus Christ. And, as we see these two plans placed before us, one we might be inclined to because of our fallenness, but we are called by grace to the other. And we know grace heals our fallenness, and it allows us to fulfill the vocation we have as the children of God. And so I say that, acknowledging that there is an enemy, there is another plan, there's a lot of distractions. Nevertheless, if we have an open heart and we turn to God, like he will call us to that fullness. Like his spirit will work. His spirit will protect us. His spirit will pray through us and bring to conclusion the work that we are called to do as his children, as God's children.
Our guest has been Father Jeffrey Kirby, and his book, which we highly recommend, is Real Religion: How to Avoid False Faith and Worship God in Spirit and Truth. It's out from Catholic Answers Press. It's been such a blessing to have you on today.
Likewise. Thank you both.
Real quickly, Father, as we go out, where for listeners who want to find the book and who also want to track you down and whatever else you're doing, social media, other books, etc., where can they find all that?
Yep. So the book's available through the publisher, Catholic Answers Press, or on Amazon, or through a local Catholic bookstore. And my website is frkirby.com. We try to post articles and various spiritual resources, so frkirby.com.
Love it. Great. Well, thanks, and God bless the good work you're doing, Father. We'll hopefully catch up with you down the road here somewhere.
Amen. Sounds good. God bless you.
Thank you. You too. God bless.
For the rest of you, stay right where you are, because we will be right back here on The Catholic Conversation.
For all the latest news and events from the Diocese of Phoenix, visit catholicsun.org/events. Follow us on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Instagram at Phoenix Diocese. Stay connected.
And welcome back to The Catholic Conversation. I'm Steve Green, Director of Keno Catechetical Institute at the Diocese of Phoenix. I'm the Cradle Catholic here with my lovely wife, Becky the Convert, who feels that I don't believe in her. Because when off air, she made the comment after a little bit of a PSA, a little bit of a public service announcement by Becky about some stuff. She said, "Oh, I'll never be able to run for political office. There's just too much of me out there." And I was like, "And what a shame that will be." And then she looked at me with this kind of glary look like, "You don't believe in me. You don't want me to run for public office." I said, "No, that's not true at all." And then she started singing a song, and that's when I stopped believing in her. Becky is a lovely woman and a wonderful wife and mother and friend and et cetera, et cetera. And she has many, many gifts and talents.
Go on.
And
Yep. What are you going to go to next?
and if kidnappers were ever to take one of our children and demand that one of the two of us sing a beautiful song to get them released,
Yeah. Which one are we going to pick?
we would probably have me
Yeah.
sing that song.
We'd put you forward. Yep. Representing. That's right.
That's all I have to say about that.
But you can't do a handstand. So there.
No, I can't. I am a lanky white man. And as it turns out, lanky white men are not
You're gonna
usually
get canceled.
that's not the raw material for a gymnast. Not lanky men of any color, really, but yeah, lank and gymnastics are not necessarily the combination. So I'm a shade under 6'2", and that's the good thing though is because of my height. If I was a gymnast, I wouldn't need help to get like up on the rings. You know how like gymnasts, they do the rings, which is really kind of amazing, but the little fellers, they need help getting up there. They got to have another feller kind of toss him up in the air so they can catch the rings. And once they got them, they can do some stuff that I
show
can't.
you up.
That's right. Once those little fellers are on those rings, let me tell you, friend, they can do stuff I can't even dream of doing. But at the same time,
You are mean
they
to
can't jump
gymnasts.
up and grab the rings by themselves.
You
and I
are
can.
mean
So
to
in a
gymnasts.
sense, I'm really better at gymnastics, at least that apparatus, than any gymnast.
We are stronger than any other athlete out there.
I would not argue that. Yeah, it's what gymnasts can do, and I'm by virtue of being married to a gymnast, I also have the great joy of meeting some gymnasts who I've always said they're like real people, only smaller. They're these small, bouncy, human-like creatures that
Randomly kick up into handstands.
they do.
Well
and,
into their 40s
and they
beyond.
can do all these flips
no
and stuff.
reason.
Then you go over to someone's house and everyone's swimming in the pool and you're like doing cannonballs and all of a sudden your wife gets up and does like the, triple double twisting back McFlip ginger thing that some Russian swimming pool person invented. It's pretty great.
The Mick flip. That's it.
That's right.
What
It's
I'm
all
whipping out.
pretty. It's all pretty great.
Well, all that to say, I really enjoyed Real Religion, and the joke about believing in me it kind of comes back to that. Is it Chesterton in Orthodoxy who talks about the concept of believing? This whole idea of you just believe in yourself.
Yeah, he takes aim at the idea that man will do well. He believes in himself. And Chesterton says the very surest way to not end well is to believe in yourself.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
I enjoyed Father Kirby quite a bit. He was a delight.
That was great. Yeah, the
and
book is great. Father Kirby's great.
I hope he comes back on.
Everything is awesome.
Nope. Don't do it.
It's the Lego movie.
I
You
know.
don't want me to sing the soundtrack from the Lego movie
You are a
for our
better
listener?
singer than I, but even I don't want to hear you sing.
Even if you're a good singer, no one wants to hear you sing the soundtrack from the Lego movie.
It's sad because now all of our listeners will have that in their head. That's unfair. That's
I'm sorry,
unkind.
yeah, dear listener, I did not.
Shameful what you do.
I
to
did
them.
not think before I acted just then, so I'm very sorry if you now have the Lego movie soundtrack in your
You
head.
do not have to believe in
At least I
Steve.
didn't sing the other song from the second
Stop it.
Lego movie.
No, I don't want you to even bring it up. You just now that's not good because now that is in my head. Good grief. Okay, so Real Religion, Father Jeffrey Kirby. Please get this book, How to Avoid False Faith and Worship God in Spirit and Truth. It's so timely. It's
Yep.
so timely.
You get it on Amazon. You get it Catholic.com, of course, because it's published by Catholic Answers. And then Father Kirby, F.R. Kirby, which is KIRBY.com, is his personal website with all sorts of other great resources. So hit that as well.
Next time, the one and only George Weigel. That's right.
Oh, yeah. George Weigel, friend of the program, friend of the family. He and I have still not had the opportunity to share a glass of scotch yet. And
You called him friend of the. Is that really like he doesn't come over to our house or anything?
no, I was totally lying about that
I know
part.
it,
I was
that's-
trying to impress our listener.
They know
No, he's
better.
not a friend of the family.
They know better. I mean, we would be friends.
He's a
with
friend
him
of the program.
if he
Though. He's
wanted
come
to
back
be friends
on
with us.
in spite of all odds. against all odds.
I think you forgot. Who are these people?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's probably true.
Wait a minute.
Once we log on with him, he's like, "Oh no, oh yes, I forgot. I meant to write this down."
Yeah, these are the people that start out with Adolf Hitler and move into swing dancing. I don't see.
Dun, 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 dun. George Weigel is going to be on the show next time, so you're definitely going to want to catch it. Whether you do or not, make sure you hit us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Subscribe to the podcast so that when we drop new episodes, they drop directly on you. And in the meantime, thanks as always for being part of the Catholic conversation. Remember, the church has what the world needs, so learn your faith, live your faith, and share your faith.